Right, 1 past. We probably kick off, and I'm sure more and more people will be joining in the coming minutes. But hello everyone, and welcome to our first talk, the modeling speaker series. This autumn, we're doing 5 of these presentations from today till around mid-December. My name is Jose Canevario. I work in the modeling and biostatistics team here at ECTC. And today we're very excited to have Sheetal Silal, Professor Sheetal Silal, I should say, joining us for today's presentation. Sheetal is an associate professor at Cape Town University in South Africa. She has worked extensively in modeling malaria in South Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and then globally, but also COVID-19, pertussis, and other infectious diseases. She is the director of the Modeling and Simulation Hub Africa and an honorary research fellow in tropical disease modeling at Oxford University. And today she'll be doing a presentation on strengthening capacity in modeling and analytics in Africa. If you have questions, we'll do the presentation. It's around 25 minutes or so, and then you can use the raise hand button on the top of your screen and answer the question, or you can paste the question in the chat and we can read that loud for you. Right, I've talked too much. Thank you very much, Sheetal, for joining us today, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Jose, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me. I'm just going to do the usual and just share my screen. I think we should be good.
Yep.
Brilliant. So thanks everyone. Thanks for coming to the presentation today. So I'm going to be talking on novel approaches to strengthening analytics and modeling capacity in Africa. And today I'll be presenting some work on a framework that was developed just after the pandemic and has been applied actually by a few people around the African continent already. And I wanted to focus on one of my current applications of this framework. And all of this was really around, we've all, we modeled and we supported the decisions that were being made throughout the pandemic. And at the end, towards as we, passed the Omicron big wave, we were asking the questions, well, are we going to be around the next time to deal with the next inevitable pandemic, or, epidemics are now happening. Oh, we're seeing measles epidemics around the world. Is it always going to be us who are going to be doing the going to be doing the modeling, doing the policy support? How are we going to train this workforce? And very much a front of mind in modelers like myself based in LMICs, we ask those very questions, but from the perspective of, does the capacity exist? Does the capacity need to be strengthened, needs to be grown and developed and tailored towards providing this type of modeling and analytic support in a continent like Africa, where much of the disease burden is born throughout the world? So with that in mind, a group of us had embarked on a study that has been that was published in about 2022, made available through the Oxford Policy Management networks. And this piece of work, led by myself and my colleagues at Oxford University, Oxford Policy Management, and other consultants on the African continent, we came together to draft a framework for strengthening modeling capacity on the African continent. And whilst it focused on modeling capacity, it is really something that could be applied to many STEM careers. And I think the novelty of doing something like this was about how do we create customized interventions, ones that are particularly suitable, that will address, when it comes to modeling, the real need for modeling on the African continent. And when I say real need, perhaps it's a little colloquial to say so, but what we're really focusing on here is policy modeling, decision support modeling, and not necessarily modeling that stays within academic institutions or is of academic value, but really the type of modeling that can be real time and supporting implementation, operationalization, as well as major policy choices and strategy development for governments, and not just during pandemics and epidemics, but also during peacetime, for all the diseases that these countries are being afflicted by. So that was the focus of our work. How do we create this framework to develop a policy model, and what is it going to really take? Knowing that we need this capacity to be strengthened in an accelerated manner. So the manner in which we set out to do this work was that we first did 3 country-level case studies, and these were in Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa. And the reason for choosing these 3 countries were that these 3 countries were at different stages of policy modeling capacity, and so we wanted to understand the response to modeling and the ways in which modeling was actually supported and the capacity available in country to perform different types of policy modeling through these case studies. And this strategy that we developed, it really emphasized the need of what I guess we know already, but it was good to see it emphasized, that country-specific or customized approaches to capacity strengthening are necessary. And what this framework went on to do was to list 30 plus intervention ideas that could be implemented to support capacity development. I do suggest that if you are interested in this space, to have a read through this this framework document. Is really not long, but I think it is ripe with ideas that can be easily implemented. So not to dwell too much on the framework itself, but to provide you with a bit of an overview of what the resulting framework post these case studies actually looks like. And so firstly, just addressing these what do we call these rectangles here up top, is to classify a country or a space based on what capacity already exists. And that's why we focus on capacity strengthening, because there's no country on our continent, on the African continent, that has no capacity, right? So you're starting off at a place where perhaps there might be minimal modeling capacity, or even a different starting point where there's strong policy links, as in these relationships with decision makers are there and well established, and there's an appetite for modeling, but the local capacity for modeling does not exist, or is not well developed, or these are just not connected. There are other classifications that a country may fall in to, where there is research modeling capacity already, or where there's policy ready modeling capacity. And this is where I think you can start seeing the difference from the academic type of modeling only, or academic modeling that is limited to academic use only, versus modeling that is suitable to be supporting decision making. But you could also go from one end of the spectrum, where there's modeling capacity located within institutions only, to the nth side, on the right-hand side here, where you've got perhaps an established international modeling center of excellence for policy research and training that exists and services the country's needs through training and building this workforce, this capacity on a continuous and sustainable basis, as well as producing country-relevant research, and have those links with your government and decision-making agencies to provide the support, and can be readily called upon during emergency settings. But that is also few and far between on the African continent. But there is a place, in between a minimal academic modeling capacity only and a fully fledged international center that there could be a strong network that exists within a country for policy modeling. Or there's the relationships exist, but the actual modeling itself has not transitioned from an academic sense to a policy to be policy ready. And so what our activities or our interventions really focused on was, what do you really need to go from whatever starting point a country is in to a goal that a country wishes to pursue. So it may well be the case that a country might say, look, we do not have a capacity to have a fully fledged modeling center that is based and funded by the country. But if the academic institutions could come together to form their own center of excellence and create a strong network, well, that could be something we aim for. So a country would determine their starting point and then determine a goal endpoint, and then choose a set of connective, supportive, and foundational interventions that could be put in place in order to move towards the end goal. And so if one is moving from, a space of a minimal modeling capacity, what might be needed are more on the foundational side. So training in academic modeling is one aspect here, but also training in policy modeling. And this foundational aspect might be relevant where there's strong academic modeling, but not much focus on supporting modeling to support decision making. On the other hand, there could be good capacity existing institutions, but these supportive interventions are required to be establishing collaborative networks, to be establishing career development pathways to make sure that the existing capacity does exist through career development even 5 to 10 years later. And of course, connective interventions are equally important in order to link where the capacity is within institutions and the needs of the decision makers themselves. And I think we all know far too well the criticisms lobbied at modelers with respect to poor communication of modeling and so on. We now know the importance of training in scientific communication of modeling and communication of uncertainty. We know the importance of linking modelers with policymakers and that of co-creation when it comes to our models, so that there is buy-in from the policymakers and input from those who are requiring modeling questions to be, or rather questions to be answered through modeling. So establishing those linkages and establishing that pipeline through connective activities is equally important. And so what this framework goes on to do is to list a range of interventions, and they fall into these into these themes, I think, that are linked or listed here in this diagram. And so the target given by the colors of the diagram are who these interventions are aimed at. And not everything is aimed at the student or the early career academic who you're trying to train. In fact, you can see here only 2 tiles are aimed at the student or the early career academic. But in order to establish the pipeline, one needs to take a systemic view. There's going to be plenty of interventions that need to be targeted at established modelers, at higher education institutions themselves to strengthen the institutions, at coordinating bodies, at government who are the chief requesters of modeling, as well as adjacent organizations or NGOs who support government. They too have a role to play. And so what this document focuses on is listing interventions in these categories with these different targets, but considering the depth and the scope and sustainability of each of these interventions. And then a person using this framework would be able to cherry pick interventions that are needed to ensure sustainability to the degree with which they would like to achieve it, and design a strategy that is customized or suitable to their needs. And so just some example interventions, and I actually have listed quite a few here. And, for example, on the foundational side, this is perhaps the most obvious to us. If we want to train students, we want to train, create future modelers, what do? We train them in formal programs. We train them in academic modeling. They do master's degrees, they do PhDs or postdoctoral training with the hopes that this is going to be launching a research career. So the intervention is aimed at students. It is formal academic training in modeling. In terms of depth, these PhD and postdoc trainees and master's trainees could themselves launch a research career. And this could itself be producing, a career's worth of high impact work across several decades. And through onward supervision, you've got the multiplier effect of creating more students and modelers. So for each trainee, they under the assumption that the institutions are able to absorb these candidates and create meaningful long-term careers, it can be quite in-depth an intervention. Sustainability, however, and this I speak to for the African continent in particular, it matters. It depends on the amount of funding that is available to train these students. There are many once-off funding opportunities that have emerged recently, but they are largely once-off. So what happens in the next 5 to 10 years, I guess we're going to have to wait and see. So the sustainability of these kinds of programs is dependent on funding and competitively funded scholarships with opportunities for employment, because this depth is only realized if these scholarships result in work opportunities for these candidates. Other foundational activities, and these have been done in the past, so perhaps I think we'll see with depth and sustainability that it's not particularly they've not been particularly fruitful. So we're quite used to the training in policy modeling, or in terms of a short-term course or something like that, and short-term courses are great, but what we're referring to here are in fact continuous support or continuous training. If this can be provided, does depend on the existence of ready opportunities to apply this modeling, to apply this new knowledge that is being gained. Otherwise, the knowledge stays in academic value only, but it can allow for a transition from existing researchers or early career researchers to start contributing to policy-related modeling work. Moving beyond foundational activity to some connective activities, here we're looking at connecting students with policymakers. Secondments to government are one such initiative. Now, from a depth perspective, this is likely to be transformative for the researchers or the students involved. It can negatively impact traditional career pathways if you're taking some time off as a student to be based in a government, but it can also contribute to a culture change where suddenly within an institution making decisions, you have a free person, so to speak, who is doing work that has not necessarily been done in your government before. So you get to be, as a policymaker, you're exposed to new techniques to see how modeling can be used to answer questions and support decision making, can lead to improved policy processes with the right level of support and political will. But we need the modeling researchers to be able to retain and apply their skills throughout their careers and beyond just these secondments themselves. So there's these opportunities for this intervention to bear fruit. We do need these opportunities to translate. We need the secondments to translate into onward opportunities to actually implement these skills. With the early career researchers and students, other connective activities, I'll go through it now quite quickly. We've grant writing and scientific writing and training. Looking at engaging the service of evidence brokers. So this was for evidence brokers would be your NGOs, your adjacent organizations. Engaging the services of evidence brokers can help to alleviate some of the time commitments that government and hesitations that governments often have when engaging with academic institutions. A student wants to do a degree or they want to do a project, but they're going to be slow to start and they're going to have lots of questions on data sets, and governments don't often have the time to deal with this because everybody is almost always overworked and does not have the time to engage. And so an evidence broker here, an NGO who's working to support government, would be ideally placed to be this go-between the academic institutions and the decision makers themselves. And of course, from a sustainability perspective, this is at risk when your evidence brokering organization sees the relationship. And so there does need to be sustained commitment from the evidence brokers to be training new officials every few years or so. So on the supportive side, realizing that it's not just enough to train students academically and expecting them to be accepted into the world of modeling or find a place in the world of modeling. So here we speak of supportive activities like creating a network, and if something like this is in fact implemented, it can provide a forum to accelerate problem solving. More importantly, mutual knowledge sharing or transfer, learning from each other's experiences, and of course our platform today is a network where hopefully students and early career researchers themselves can be benefiting as well. But this also does depend on the commitment from constituent organizations in order for it to last, and funding to be able to facilitate a network. Other supportive activities include leadership training, where this quite often we train students, or we expect this to be provided by their own environment. On the African continent, I've learned not to take this for granted from a schooling system or a university system to be providing this type of training. And so it is required to help candidates and postgraduate students and other trainees, even early career researchers, to understand how to be leaders in a field and become the leaders of the continent that we hope that they will be in a few years' time. And so from a sustainability point of view, the modeling researchers are likely to retain and apply these skills throughout their careers, as well as sharing them with other colleagues. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're busy with here at the University of Cape Town. So we were one of the recipients of a Gates Foundation grant on strengthening capacity on the African continent in malaria modeling. And this project started in 2023. And we are tasked with training 13 PhD candidates. And these candidates are all to be trained in malaria modeling on the African continent. In particular, I'm registering 13 candidates as well as 3 postdoctoral candidates in the first. So you can see the wide breadth of countries that we are supporting. I chose to make this project, to make this training program residential, unlike my other the other grant awardees on this particular call. And the reason for doing so was that, in line with the framework that we had developed a year or so prior, there was much in the way of connective and supportive activities that needed to be provided. And already we were witnessing challenges with internet and so on. And I felt that it was very important to be building a community amongst these candidates who are in many ways the first modelers in their country. So it was very important for me to be taking a personal hand in their growth, and to have them residential at the University of Cape Town, so that we could perform or provide ad hoc support as the project moved along. So an overview of what some of the challenges that we had to deal with and what we aimed for. So it's a 3-year residential program, all based at the University of Cape Town. It started in February 2023. It's a fully funded scholarship that was provided. That's South African rand, so it's about 18 rands to a US dollar, or 20 rands to a euro, somewhere around there. And 300,000 inflation adjusted for 3 years. We provided them with a laptop for the duration of the program. We realized that we were going to have to do quite a bit of front loading. And so we paid for their initial travel to be coming down to Cape Town. We could not just assume that the students would have funding to do so. We paid for their accommodation from their bursaries in advance. Their visa fees were also paid for, as well as the medical aid that is required to get a visa to be able to actually register at the University of Cape Town. Our desired profile of our candidates were the countries listed below. These countries are, in particular, the first 8 here, from Angola up until Zimbabwe, are what we call the SADC Elimination 8, Southern African Development Community Elimination 8 countries who are targeting elimination by 2030 in Southern Africa. And then we also had Western Central African partners, West African partners, Cameroon, Ghana, and Benin. We also were targeting a 50% female candidates. So when we began a really extensive recruitment process, we realized that there were many challenges we were going to have to deal with. And part of those challenges were, with the exception of Zimbabwe, in the region, the mathematics base was lower in our region. And so this limited the applications that we could actually consider to be part of a PhD program, knowing, of course, that the PhD, what we adopt here in South Africa is, I think, pretty much a British PhD system, where it's 3 years, no training provided. It's 3 years of just research on one's own. So it was a very different ask than providing an additional year of coursework. Angola, for example, has historically had a bit of a limited participation in training activities in the region. And so we do not have any candidates from Angola in our current intake, but have already made inroads into working with Angola on other grants where we can hopefully be training more students. The one challenge we had to deal with is that postgraduate study, the idea of, after one's bachelor's degree, doing a master's degree or a PhD, is a privilege in the world I live in. That you are having to toss up between going to get a job where you will be better paid than receiving a student bursary. And the reason you need to get a job is because most often you have to be supporting your own siblings, your cousins, and so on, to be going through university as well. So you immediately are paying for university fees for others as soon as you finish your own degree. And that is how families end up having some form of tertiary education post leaving school. In many African countries on the continent, including South Africa. And so we're vitally aware of the drop off once tertiary education is completed, once your undergraduate is completed, and having a very small pool of postgraduate students to really sample from, because employment is far more attractive and necessary for the ongoing functioning of families. And so we knew that we would have to provide very competitive bursaries in order to attract students so that they could still meet their family needs whilst also being able to upskill themselves through postgraduate study. And so the bursaries we provided were about 40% more than what the governments provide in South Africa, for example. The other challenge we faced was that, regional master's degrees are not recognized by the University of Cape Town and many European universities. And so the reason for this is the research component in many master's degrees is not sufficiently large to guarantee that a student is ready for a 3-year research-only degree of a PhD. And so I had to face that challenge with half my cohort actually not being allowed entry into a PhD program at my university. And so I had to then register them for master's degrees by dissertation only, so not coursework, with the coursework component, dissertation only, a 2-year extra degree, with the option to upgrade to PhD. And so they had an extra challenge to meet in their first year of working towards doing enough work to upgrade their master's degrees to become PhD registration degrees. And in many ways, that meant designing new systems at the university, new criteria for these upgrades, because it was not a well-known initiative prior to my starting this system or starting this program. The other major challenges that I experienced were that awareness of disease modeling is itself quite limited. So we're not getting students coming into PhDs who have even been exposed to disease modeling prior to this. And so it becomes necessary to provide a lot more support than one would ordinarily do if a student was coming in pre-prepared to do a PhD in disease modeling. So I had to rethink and design a program that even within an academic institution, you're not really getting credited for. When I say credited for, I mean in terms of one's time commitments and so on. And so what we're providing here, our Malaria Modeling and Analytics Leaders in Africa program, is we're providing a very comprehensive set of training. So it's the your quantitative skills in modeling, your basics, your different methodologies of modeling, and so on, the techniques of calibration and validation, sensitivity analysis, the works when it comes to your your standard curriculum for disease modeling. But we've got to add everything else. We've got to add the malaria biology component. We've got to add malaria policy, malaria entomology. How does the landscape of financing work in the malaria world? What are the operational and implementation considerations that go with malaria? So all of this is part of the training that we provide. We then also make sure that each of the projects that the candidates are doing is in direct partnership with their NMCP, stands for National Malaria Control Program. So with the malaria control program within their Ministry of Health. And so that it is supportive of the Ministry of Health. But even that's a little bit of a balancing act, because when you want to help a government, they want help right now. But we are trying to train PhD candidates here, which means they're going to get help maybe in 3 years. So trying to design projects that will be of value to the ministry was a challenge, but we do have buy-in on that front, and securing data sharing contracts, all of that needs to come with it, with these practical projects, and making sure that they are of priority to the malaria strategic plans. So there's a partnership here with each of the governments in the countries that the students are from. And so each student is working on a program from their own country, on a project from their own country with their own government, to satisfy our end goal of having a trained modeler in each of the countries. So when it comes to leadership training, we provide additional training in stakeholder engagement, in scientific communication. In fact, here we have a resident scientific communication expert who works with the students throughout each of their proposal development stages, the drafting of their chapters, publication of papers. Right now, they're here doing a series on doing presentations. These are not skills that the students have acquired or been exposed to throughout their school careers or through their undergraduate degrees. And so we need to provide them as part of their career development. Knowledge translation is another a key aspect of their soft skills training. We don't do this alone. There's a lot to be done, but we don't do this alone. We have partners. Our local partners are the local governments and local universities where they are available. We also work with advocacy partners. So one of our partners is the SADC Elimination 8 initiative, and this initiative supports advocacy in the region and ensures that there is a coordinated theme of research being conducted that is in line with the needs of the Ministries of Health, and they are the ones who will do all the diplomatic engagement for us, facilitate the data sharing agreements, and helped us with the recruitment as well. So they are our advocacy partners, helping us with dissemination of research findings as well. But we can't forget our operational partners. And these are the partners who help our students understand that, what you do in your model on your computer is not the end goal. How do we translate this into, the designing a net distribution program in looking at the social behavioral communication change that needs to happen, understanding how to work with the DHIS2 system, and so on. So these are the other operational partners involved. So to end off, I want to just highlight with you a couple of key factors for success that we have learned from our experience here at the University of Cape Town. One is we needed relevant project topics. If you want to have sustained partnerships with National Malaria Control Programs or with any Ministry of Health, whether we're talking pandemics or epidemic response, or even endemic response with NITAGs and so on, you need to have relevant project topics so that they will be continuously engaged, and because they can also have the time that it's a bit of a training for those requesting the projects as well. I think that's the important part, that we don't just need to train the trainee, we need to train those who are requesting the modeling too, so that there is an understanding of modeling, understanding of the roles and responsibilities that the decision maker or the policy maker plays, the consumer of modeling plays throughout the modeling process. And a PhD program or a longer term, even a 3-year program or something longer than a year allows a decision maker to themselves understand their roles, the role that they need to play at different stages of the modeling process, and supports the idea of co-creation to ensure sustainability of modeling support into the future. The right partners, I think, are definitely a key factor for success. We cannot do all of this alone. And we know modeling does not exist in a vacuum. And the modeling, the data to decision-making pipeline is itself a function of multiple stakeholders. So having the right partners is very helpful. Creating informed demand for modeling. Modeling only becomes sustainable if people keep asking for it. And one of the things that we're doing, and actually beginning in March next year, is as part of this Gates Foundation Award, we are designing an accredited, it's actually going to be a 6-month course now that we're working on the design, a 6-month course on critical engagement with models for decision makings targeted at those in government. So each of our governments are going to be requested to nominate 3 people within their malaria control programs who will be the ones who generally would be engaging with modeling. And what this course is focused on is understanding of data and data exploration, understanding what the modeling process is, how to engage. If I'm faced with a paper that is not for my region, or faced with a WHO recommendation on some that is based on some modeling, how do I engage whether these models are suitable? How do I translate or generalize models from one setting to another? Have the right questions been answered? How have these models dealt with uncertainty? So these are the types of content we intend to cover in the 6-month program for malaria. And I'm also, given that the other half of my life is working in vaccine modeling, I'm working on adapting this course to be suitable to vaccine decision makers for NITAGs as well. The last innovation that I'll discuss, and this again is a bit of a novel one, that we have an internal consultancy program that I've manufactured for the trainees. So at Mercer, we're busy with a bunch of different diseases. Malaria, as I mentioned, is only sort of half our lives. There's always work to be done, and sometimes there's small activities that we shop out to the trainees for. We say, well, these are some consultancies on offer. Please do sign up, and it gives the trainees some exposure to what it means to be working in real time frames. Gives them exposure to working with clients, and seeing how we interact with the government officials, and so on. And it also trains them in non-malaria work, because at the end of the day, we're trying to build modelers. yes, they might be focused on malaria for their degrees, but for the next pandemic, the next epidemic, whatever needs their country may have for modeling, we want them to be versatile enough to develop models of different diseases. And so this kind of exposure that we're providing them, be it schistosomiasis or measles or rubella or whatever it might be, is giving them that training on how do I in a quick turnaround, develop brief reports or independently complete an exercise that is completely out of their domain. So providing that type of consultancy training before they become consultants once they are graduated from this program. So with that in mind, I do hope that we've been that there is something that that is of relevance to you in the region from our experiences. The framework itself is quite useful, and there's wonderful ideas for the interventions that have been listed. We've taken that framework and these ideas and grown it even more in our application by trying to provide this type of ad hoc support with the real-time sort of monitoring and evaluation that we're doing. And with that, I'd like to thank the Gates Foundation, acknowledging them for the grant that really has enabled us to do this type of work, as well as all our partners in the Ministries of Health on the African continent, our advocacy partners, operational partners, and local partners, and especially to you for inviting me to give this seminar today. Thank you.
Wow, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much, Sheetal. I have to say, I googled your name before the earlier today, and I learned that Sheetal means cool, calm, gentle, conveys a sense of peace and composure. But from your talk to me, you convey a sense of passion and drive, and very inspiring. And it's also very clear that you know your region, you know your discipline very, very well. And I loved how some things that you mentioned are it's also applying common sense. Obviously you want to hire good professionals, people that have a degree already, but maybe they've had families and whatnot. You need to give them a good salary. This is not just a problem in Africa; it's a problem everywhere. Like in my experience, during my PhD, salaries weren't great. I had peers that, were struggling to make ends meet with, So it's a common problem. I'd love to see that you're applying the good common sense and actioning on that. Yeah, that was a terrific presentation. And while you were talking, I was thinking maybe that there are opportunities for interaction with ECDC, I don't know, some sort of secondments or whatnot. I also really loved this idea of having PhD students working in practical projects in conversation with public health agencies, accessing real data, working on real problems. That's often not the case, and you have academia working on one end on imaginary projects, and then government sitting in a pile of data and with real public health questions that need someone to work on, and there's no connection. So making that connection, fantastic. Really loved your presentation. Thank you very much. We'll now open the floor for questions. Any questions from the audience? We have Katarina.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much. Very, very inspiring and great progress you've made there. So I work for Affinity for a small data analytics business, and we often have interns, but the majority of our interns, data interns and modeler interns, come, of course, from Europe or the US. And I guess as a company, we are very keen to engage with people from other geographies as well, but we found it incredibly hard to do that. So my question is, what is the appetite to engage with industry partners around educating, cohorts like yours? Because I think there is an appetite from industry, but we find it incredibly difficult to engage.
Thanks. Jose, would you like to take a few questions, or we just should we do it one at a time?
We can do one at a time.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Katerina. So I think absolutely yes, there is definitely an appetite. And I mean, I don't just even say this from my own cohort, but as far as I do know, I think from institutions, there academic institutions, there is an appetite to be engaging with private sector, and something that I personally lobby here. I mean, aside from this malaria modeling project that I was doing, I recently worked to launch a data science internship program for exactly this reason, where the students work on either private sector problems or government problems for their dissertations, as another mode of doing something real, rather than an academic project for their masters. So my short answer to you is absolutely yes, and I'd love to engage with you anyway, offline after this.
Leah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the talk, and also thank you for the work that you're doing. I have two quick questions. In the beginning, you were mentioning these evidence brokers who would bridge, I think, science or academic research and policy. And I was wondering, who do you envision to kind of fill that role? And the second question that I have is, you were kind of setting up this PhD program, but I do think that you have a need of modelers, and I do see a strong overlap between doing a PhD in modeling and also modelers that do work for decision-making processes. But I do see that, well, I'm just wondering, why did you frame it as a PhD program and not just as a general training program? Because I do think that there are discrepancies between being a scientist and researcher and being a modeler. Strong overlap, but not always completely aligned. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. So on your first question on the evidence brokers, so here an example of the partners we work with are the Clinton Health Access Initiative, the local country offices. And the reason for doing so is that they are often seconded to government. So they are the ones who would be doing much of that sort of legwork of the data analysis and sometimes low-level technical work, but also operational support of implementing or designing activities. So they would be one example of an evidence broker. Another example would be, I mean, I'm just thinking like Zambia, there'd be MASEPA, and there's a bunch of NGOs. I think, I don't know how Europe works, I'll be honest there. So I don't know to what degree NGOs have a place to support Ministries of Health, but in many LMICs, government does not have enough capacity to do all it needs, and so an NGO supports in that. So it could be like, they often are the people who like run surveys for government, or they'll be doing some of the contact tracing that gets sort of farmed out, or that type of support. So that was question one. Question two is a very simple answer as to why I made this a PhD program. The funder required it. Simple answer. I'll give you that. Would that have been my first choice? No. I don't think you need to be a PhD graduate to be a modeler who can be trained in policy support. So no, I don't. And in fact, I probably could have achieved a lot more with masters. I would say we have 2-year masters programs in South Africa, 1-year coursework and 1-year dissertation and training, and I would have added perhaps a 3rd year of secondment, and that would have helped a little bit towards creating employment opportunities. Because my biggest gripe, and I have, gripe is the wrong word, but I think issue that I raised, and I raised this very openly with funders as well, is lovely that we're training all of this capacity, but tell me, where are they going to get employed? The academic institutions, and I know this is also a challenge faced in Europe, that the academic institutions simply do not have capacity to absorb these candidates. And I think in Africa, the situation is worse, because you can be employed as let's say a lecturer, or given a 3-year contract or something as a lecturer, but you don't have the resources for research. So you done a PhD degree full of research, and then you're teaching 8 hours a day, and so then there's just no capacity of the institutions to be strong in research. So and that's something that's been that I'm not, it's been a topic of discussion, and I'm sort of trying to make some sort of headways there in thinking along these lines of consultancies, and actually perhaps to mention to Katerina, something along the lines of private-public partnerships are exactly one of the places where I'm looking at to try create onward opportunities for these candidates after their graduation.
All right, we're running out of time now, but thank you very much, everyone, for attending and participating with your questions. And special thanks again to Sheetal, for a fantastic talk. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you in the next Morning Speak Series talk.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.